Hello, patriots, praying citizens, and truth seekers. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2019. If you're wondering why it seems like things are crazy right now, it's because they're trying to wear us down. They're trying to cause us to give up. They're throwing everything they have at wearing us down, convincing us it's hopeless. They've got a gun grab going on. They're calling us names. They've relegated the conservatives to second-class citizens, and they're trying to take our freedoms. But they're losing, and I want to show you why. Let's start with this video that was on Twitter. CJ Truth writes, "Do you believe in coincidences? Think D5. Panic in DC." And this was put out by someone called The Damage Report. And note that there are different dates. Some of these videos were filmed back in 2017.
Sure that I've ever even heard of a Category 5. Category 5 is something that I don't know that I've ever even heard the term. I've never seen a category like this come in because it came in really at a 5. It was a Category 5. I never even knew a Category 5 existed. Got hit as a 5, Category 5 storm, which just literally never happened. It actually touched down as a Category 5. People have never seen anything like that. This has been a Category 5, which few people have ever even heard of. A Category 5. Nobody's ever heard of a 5 hitting land. Category 5 hurricane. Category 5. Never heard about Category 5s before.
It's really... So what is he trying to say there, guys? Well, let's see. This tweet is from last night. The U.S. may be getting a bit lucky with respect to Hurricane Dorian, but please don't let down your guard. As it heads up the coast, lots of very bad and unpredictable things can happen. On the other hand, the Bahamas have been devastated. We are sending crews to help. So, is the president trying to tell us something with this hurricane? It was a Category 5 as it hit the Bahamas, and it stayed there, but now it's dropped down to a Category 2, very close to a Category 3, just 1 mile per hour difference. And let's take a look at where the storm is headed. So here we are, 5 p.m. on Wednesday. It's kind of right off the Georgia-Florida line, and then it's moving out to sea just a little bit, and it looks like by the end of the day, Friday, it will be way offshore of the United States. That's according to its current path, but we just pray that God would send it further out into the ocean and protect these communities along the coast there in the Carolinas. These are just a few images that were taken from a plane flying over the Bahamas. You can see the great devastation there, water just covering the land. Now, AOC got into it just a little bit, and she's trying to say that the hurricane affects disadvantaged communities. Well, the last time I checked, the people that have money are the ones that are on the ocean. They have their homes on the ocean. So she writes, "This is what climate change looks like. It hits vulnerable communities first. I can already hear climate deniers screeching, 'It's always been like this. You're dim,' etc. No, this is about science and leadership. We either decarbonize and cut emissions, or we don't and let people die." So this is some of that same old Green New Deal, spend $93 trillion, take away our cars, put us in stack and pack housing in the cities, and we don't allow airplanes to fly. Well, I guess people like AOC will still fly in airplanes. It's just more insanity. I found this on Twitter, and it was posted by Tony Heller today, and it's a headline: 1867 hurricane swept clean the Virgin Islands and St. Thomas, and a quote from that report: "At Kingston, only 4 or 5 houses are left. At West End, only 4 or 5 out of 80 houses. Every church and chapel in the island has been unroofed. The islands have been swept clean." More proof that AOC is smoking something. Now, Donald Trump tweeted this: 8 facts that fake news CNN will ignore in tonight's climate forum. Number 1, which country has the largest carbon emission reduction? America. Who has dumped the most carbon into the air? China. Number 3, 91% of the world's population are exposed to air pollution above the World Health Organization's suggested level. None are in the USA. Number 4, the U.S. now leads the world in energy production. But, number 5, who's got the world's cleanest and safest air and water? America. Number 6, the Democrats' destructive environmental proposals will raise your energy bill and prices at the pump. Don't the Democrats care about fighting American poverty? Well, AOC says she does. Number 7, the badly flawed Paris Climate Agreement protects the polluters, hurts Americans, and costs a fortune. Not on my watch. Number 8, I want crystal clean water and the cleanest and the purest air on the planet. We've now got that. Bravo, Mr. President. I'm pretty sure none of this audience will be watching the Climate Forum. We can see that one of the things they're trying to do is to take our guns and erode our freedoms. Yesterday, Walmart announced that it will stop selling handgun ammunition and ammunition for short-barreled rifles and will also stop selling handguns in Alaska, the only state where it still sells handguns. And then today, Kroger announced that it will join Walmart in asking shoppers not to openly carry guns in their stores. And Walmart is joining them, even though they may have stores in places where open carry is allowed. They're asking people not to do so. Ted Cruz weighed in today, and September 2nd, he said gun control doesn't work. Look at Chicago. Disarming law-abiding citizens isn't the answer. Stopping violent criminals, prosecuting and getting them off the street before they commit more violent crimes is the most effective way to reduce murder rates. Let's protect our citizens. He was having a little bit of a battle with Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, and she said 60% of illegal firearms recovered in Chicago come from outside Illinois, mostly from states dominated by, and these are her words, and she's not very kind, coward Republicans like you who refuse to enact common sense gun legislation. Keep our name out of your mouth. Dan Crenshaw reacted also, and he was talking about a story. And he said, situations like this story are why we protect the Second Amendment. He posted a little clip from Maya Shea from ABC News. And let me go to that story. It focuses on this Houston woman. Her name is Lachelle Hudgens. She had just parked her car in front of her home when she was descended upon by 5 men, 2 of whom reached inside her car to snatch her purse. She quickly grabbed the gun inside her bag and screamed. She fired 2 rounds, and the men ran away. 1 robber was injured, and he will be charged with aggravated robbery. The quote from her, "I saved my life," she said. So Dan Crenshaw says situations like this story are why we protect the Second Amendment. Side note, with universal background checks, I wouldn't be able to let my friends borrow my handgun when they travel alone like this. We would make felons out of people just for defending themselves. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responded. She said, "You are a member of Congress. Why are you lending guns to people unsupervised who can't pass a basic background check? The people you're giving a gun to have likely abused their spouse or have a violent criminal record, and you may not know it." So Dan Crenshaw is a former Navy SEAL, and he is a guy who lost an eye fighting for this country, and Ocasio-Cortez accuses him of giving a gun to someone who's a friend of his who likely abused their spouse, or they have a criminal record. So Crenshaw writes, "Just so I'm clear, you think my friends are domestic abusers and criminals? Seriously, that's your argument? That they can't pass a background check? Wrong. People lend guns to friends, especially if they don't own a gun, for self-defense and hunting purposes. This is America outside New York City." Well, there was a very long train of comments on Twitter about this conversation, and obviously AOC, again, she's smoking something. Emily Miller weighs in and says, "That's implicit in what Crenshaw is saying. He knows his friends, and it isn't being irresponsible. The criminals are the ones who give each other guns without care for society's safety." And then Alexandria responds, this idea of, I know the guy, there's no way he beats his wife, as the way we keep guns out of the hands of abusers is ridiculous. Any person who has been abused, assaulted, etc. knows that abusers often present as upstanding. There's no way you'd know, that's why it's common. Domestic abusers can be master manipulators. Plus, domestic abuse is a huge indicator for gun violence. That's why vouching for a friend isn't a substitute for a background check. You wouldn't lend a car to someone without a license. Why lend a gun to someone without a background check? Rapists can have Ivy League degrees. Abusers can look like good dads or have high incomes or great jobs. Good appearances are often a cover for abusers. In fact, many abusers rely on their public reputation to intimidate partners from leaving. Example, no one will believe you. So here is this woman pounding away on our sanity, and she's bringing in, who knows, she may have looked this stuff up in a book somewhere, and she's bringing in all this stuff that doesn't really relate to the gun discussion. And I just think it's part of this effort to make us all feel like we're the crazy ones. And then there was this, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors has passed a resolution declaring that the NRA is a domestic terror organization, and they urged the federal government to do the same. They said the U.S. is plagued by an epidemic of gun violence and accuses the NRA of using its considerable wealth and organization strength to promote gun ownership and incite gun owners to acts of violence. The city and county of San Francisco should take every reasonable step to limit those entities who do business with the city and county of San Francisco from doing business with this domestic terrorist organization. I wonder if the NRA is going to file a lawsuit. I think they might have standing to do so. Let's look at some satire from the Babylon Bee. So this is supposed to be a joke, guys. Walmart discontinues auto parts sales to prevent car accidents. In a bold move intended to curb the thousands of deaths from vehicles each and every day, Walmart has decided to stop selling auto parts. We can no longer be complicit in an industry that kills over 3,000 people a day, said a spokesperson for Walmart. Again, guys, this is a joke. Every time we sell a muffler, steering wheel cover, or flame decal, we are potentially causing the death of a person, and we cannot support that any longer. It's clear that bad drivers and poor road conditions don't cause vehicular deaths. Cars do. Great job, Babylon Bee. All right, now, they're trying to wear us down by not giving us the justice that we are so desperately looking for. Paul Sperry writes, in a new letter to Attorney General Barr, Senate Judiciary Chairman Graham has formally requested the declass and release of all FISA warrant applications targeting, quote, anyone associated with the Trump campaign, including Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos. President Trump weighed in, and he is quoting somebody, which I don't think he mentions here, but he tags Charlie Kirk and Trish Reagan. He says, to declassify is so important because if this were a Democrat president or a Democrat candidate that was spied on the way President Trump was spied on, this would be a scandal that would make Watergate look like nothing, illegal spying on the President of the United States. So, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham on Tuesday sent a formal letter to AG William Barr asking him to declassify a large cache of documents which could provide a complete picture of what went on with the FBI's use of surveillance warrants during its investigations. He asked Barr to work with Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz to declassify, and he mentioned Horowitz's probe of these warrants is nearing completion, which they are looking into how the dossier was used to get the original warrant plus 3 renewals on former Trump aide Carter Page, October of 2016. Horowitz's team has questioned why the FBI considered Steele a credible source and why the Bureau seemed to use news reports to bolster the author, Steele, Christopher Steele, his credibility, because he didn't have any. Their hypocrisy is another way they're trying to wear us down, but we can see through it and it's going to catch up with them. So this is from Powerline blog. Ilhan Omar feels the heat. Of all the scandals in which Ilhan Omar is enmeshed, one might think the Daily Mail's revelation this past July of her affair with political consultant Tim Mynett would be the least of them. The news last week of Beth Mynett's divorce filing, however, has begun to disillusion a Somali community that has taken Omar at face value. Not cool at all, and it has thrown Omar off her game. Omar's denial of the affair is a lie that is both obvious and bald-faced. She has therefore run from tabloid newspapers and the local media as they have sought to report on the scandal. She keeps saying, "This is my public life. You have to stay out of my public life," and it's not really working. So in this Powerline blog, they mentioned that Omar's husband, Hersey, is telling friends that he will not go to jail for Ilhan Omar. While Omar did indeed marry her brother, whose name is Ahmed Elmi, for fraudulent purposes, Hersey did not know at the time that she had married Elmi. Omar is threatening Hersey that he would be in trouble along with her if the truth were to come out. She has asked him to state publicly that all is well with their marriage, even though it's completely done and finished. And they're living apart and have been divorced under Islamic law, although they remain legally married. First of all, Islamic law should not hold any water here in the United States. Now let's take a look at who contributes to Ilhan Omar. Her top contributors for 2019 through 2020 so far: Apple, $8,500, and Google, $7,100. So we see who's buttering your bread, Ilhan. And then these are more recent reports. Her husband wants to divorce her after this bombshell came out about the affair. And Sarah Carter writes, Tim Mynett, a political consultant accused of having an affair with Omar, insisted in recently filed court documents that the story was concocted by his estranged wife as an act of vengeance or revenge. And then this from the Imam of Peace. I follow this guy on Twitter. I don't agree with him on everything, but he has a unique perspective sometimes, and he writes about Omar: marries guy, divorces him, marries brother, divorces him, remarries first guy, separates from him, goes with Tim. Tim separates from his wife. Tim gets paid $230,000 by Omar's campaign. She says the first guy is happy. First guy says he wants a divorce. Which divorce? Islamic or legal? And then one other story about Omar. She's demanding that the UN take control of the U.S. border with Mexico and says we should do what any other country does by dealing with the situation in a serious way. So we have to bring in the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees, an agency that has the expertise and the training to handle massive flows of refugees humanely. And that's not going to happen. Now, Google promised when they went public that their watchword or their little phrase would be "don't be evil," and yet we find them doing that very thing. Google has agreed to pay a record $170 million in a penalty to settle accusations that YouTube broke the law when it knowingly tracked and sold ads targeted to children, and that's according to the FTC. And it's targeted in a new antitrust probe by state attorneys general. More than half of America's state attorneys general are set to announce a new probe into Google over possible antitrust violations in a huge escalation against big tech. According to the Washington Post, the investigation is expected to be announced September 9th at a press conference, but it's not clear whether some of the officials will also open or announce plans for probes into other tech companies like Amazon and Facebook and probably Twitter. It's been a difficult year for the Silicon Valley mainstays, which have come under increasing scrutiny for their practices around data collection, content policing, and their amassing of political and economic power. In addition, a new bill in the Senate called the Monopolization Deterrence Act would impose crippling fines on tech giants ranging as high as 15% of the firm's total U.S. revenues if they were found to be in violation of antitrust law. So let's hope, let's pray something will be done about it. They're also eroding our rights to make us feel like second-class citizens, and we have this coming out of New York. Under a new New York law, all children must begin getting their vaccines within the first 2 weeks of classes and complete them by the end of the school year. Otherwise, their parents must homeschool them or move out of the state. That affects 26,000 New York children. And I would advise those parents that if you can homeschool your kids, you will be glad you did. It's the hardest thing I ever did. I like to joke that I homeschooled 4 kids 5 years, which is 20 years of homeschooling. But it was the most difficult thing I ever did, but probably the most rewarding. And now let's talk about a preliminary hearing in a criminal case against the video journalist who exposed the sale of body baby parts by Planned Parenthood. And this was brought by former California Attorney General Kamala Harris and her successor, Attorney General Xavier Becerra. Harris had received thousands of dollars in contributions from Planned Parenthood for her re-election campaigns, and subsequently her office seized David Delayden's personal property. It wasn't until Harris was called out in the media for her lack of urgency when it came to investigating Delayden that she sent a small army of agents to raid his one-bedroom apartment. So they are taking them to task for an invasion of privacy and fraudulently representing themselves as a business partner. They're saying Delayden and his cohorts intentionally recorded confidential communications in violation of California law, even though the conversations occurred in settings in which there is no reasonable expectation of privacy. They're accusing them of trespassing. Harris also collaborated with Planned Parenthood to produce legislation that targeted David Delayden. And he writes on Twitter, abortion providers Planned Parenthood appeared under oath in court today and admitted supplying aborted body parts to for-profit brokers, STEM Express, while National Abortion Federation denied knowledge, even though they were trade show vendors. Today's testimony shows this sham case is a cover-up for Planned Parenthood. Then in Hong Kong, now this is, these protests have been going on since June, and they're getting blowback by the police. The police are becoming more and more violent, and now China is saying that is going to declare a state of emergency, which allows them to, pull out the army and go after these peaceful protesters. And then today it was announced that Hong Kong's executive director will withdraw the extradition bill, which started this thing in the first place, which would have allowed Hong Kong citizens to be sent to mainland communist China for trial if they broke the law. Beijing's top office for Hong Kong affairs declared it has the authority to declare a state of emergency, and according to Gordon Chang, who is an analyst about anything that has to do with Hong Kong and China, says the worst case scenario is that they formally deploy the People's Armed Police or the People's Liberation Army on the streets of Hong Kong. And then in Britain, this was really astonishing yesterday. This happened in Parliament, that the Brexit plan was shredded by lawmakers who oppose leaving the EU without a deal. They used an obscure procedural motion to take control of the agenda and caused Prime Minister Boris Johnson to lose a key vote in the House of Commons. Now, all 21 lawmakers from the ruling Conservative Party who voted against the government are being kicked out of the party, including Winston Churchill's grandson here on the right, Sir Nicholas Soames. Tuesday's result means that members of Parliament can now introduce a bill that would compel the Prime Minister to seek an extension to the Brexit process from the EU. That bill is likely to pass and could see Brexit delayed until next year. One member said, I don't want an election. The public does not want an election. I don't believe the right honorable gentleman wants an election. But if the House votes for this bill tomorrow, then the public will have to choose who goes to Brussels on October the 17th to sort this out. This means opposition members of Parliament and a handful of rebels from the ruling Conservative Party can now introduce legislation to postpone Brexit beyond the October 31st deadline. It seems like people of England are in need of help from God to get out of the clutches of the EU. All right, let's talk about some sanity that we're seeing. And we'll start with this. Breitbart News, President Donald Trump vindicated yet again. According to a poll, 2 in 3 U.S. voters say it's necessary for the president to fight China on tariffs and trade. And this is a quote from Sam Zell, a billionaire investment firm owner. He says the Chinese are very adept at not accepting anything. You've got to be very tough, and that's what Trump is doing. It's in China's interest to correct, and I think we'll end up with a solution that's dramatically better than we have today. Frankly, I think the impact of what Trump is doing to China is not lost on the rest of the world. Europe has had among the most protectionist policies forever. They're sitting there and saying, gee, are we next? Maybe you are. We've got to change the rules. The U.S. can't defend the world and pay for it. We can't have a system where we run our entire economy for the benefit of other countries, which have long charged us big tariffs. Don't keep ducking the reality. The U.S. has been subject to tariff terrorism for 50 years, but a real deal can be done. And Donald Trump quoted Sam Zell and put that on his Twitter feed. Now turning to Iran, John Bolton tweeted this morning, the IRGC-QF has been using a shady shipping network to move hundreds of millions of dollars in Iranian oil to the murderous Assad regime, the Iranian proxy terrorist organization Hezbollah, and other illicit actors. Today, the U.S. took action against this sprawling network. So the U.S. State Department announced a $15 million bounty for information leading to the disruption of the financial mechanisms of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its terror branches. The offer is being made through Rewards for Justice program, which has paid in the past $150 million to more than 100 people in return for information to prevent terrorism and or lead to arrests afterwards. The IRCG operates more like a terrorist organization than it does like a government to train groups. It is working to extend chaos and sectarian violence, and that is from the State Department. And also today, the president announced that he was providing $1.8 billion in funding to fight opioid abuse. And of that, $932 million will be used in grants to the states for prevention, treatment, and recovery services for opioid victims. And let's expose it all. This is our little erosion into the secret networks of the pedos, and we'll start with this. A John Doe has asked a judge to permanently seal many of the remaining documents in the defamation lawsuit filed by one of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged victims. So the lawsuit was filed by Virginia Roberts Jeffrey against Ghislaine Maxwell, and a person came up, this John Doe, yesterday and said that he fears his reputation may be damaged by unproven allegations of impropriety. There were 2 subsets of additional sealed documents that are due to be analyzed by a judge who will decide if they should also be made public. John Doe's name may or may not be in those documents, and it's said that there are 10,000 pages of documents and up to 1,000 named individuals. And I wonder who that John Doe is. Do you think his name starts with Bill Clinton? Good question, right? And then there was this. This guy is a pastor in metropolitan Atlanta of this little tiny Ebenezer church here. He's 80 years old. His name is Harter. He has led 2 churches and helped build dozens of others in the U.S. and in the Philippines, where he and his wife built an orphanage. The Harters adopted 19 children from the Philippines, and they already had a large family. I wonder how many of those children were abused. He was arrested at his Cumming area home on 1 charge of child molestation. They did not make any more announcements about this guy, and there's just 1 charge so far. I don't know if more will come forward. We'll see. And then Jordan Pruitt, who was in The Voice, she writes, 3 weeks ago, as Jane Doe, I filed a lawsuit against my molester and those who enabled him. No more Jane Doe. I am Jordan Pruitt. She had she recorded a demo album in 2006, and then she was signed. She is from Loganville, Georgia. She was a contestant on the 3rd season of The Voice. She is accusing her former manager, Keith Thomas, of sexually abusing her beginning when she was 14 years old. She's also suing Hollywood Records and its parent company, the Walt Disney Company, alleging that they failed to prevent the abuse. She says that they allowed Thomas to work with her unsupervised and be alone with her, even though it knew or should have known that he was a sexual abuser. Thomas groomed Pruitt for abuse, controlling her entire professional life, cutting off contact with boys her own age, and putting her down with negative comments about her looks and talents. He would also shower her with compliments, saying he loved her and that no one understood how special their relationship was. He also groomed her mother, gaining her trust, which enabled him to spend time alone with her. The abuse began when Pruitt was 14 and continued until a week before her 16th birthday. And she tells what went on. The guy violated her in several different ways. She alleges that the abuse occurred at the Staples Center, on sound stages at the Warner Brothers lot, in artist trailers, hotel rooms, and parked cars. Thomas kept her quiet, telling her that their love was a secret. And she only understood fully the abusive nature of their relationship last December. 8chan will be in the news tomorrow. This is a prediction. And that is because the board owner, Jim Watkins, has been asked to appear before Congress. I don't know if he will be doing that via Skype or he will be there in person because he lives in, I believe, the Philippines. But it's interesting because Representative Dan Crenshaw will be one of the persons there, one of the lawmakers, questioning Jim Watkins. Crenshaw is the one who wrote those tweets about gun ownership that AOC decided to take aim at. And Crenshaw is a former administrator for a Seth Rich, Pizzagate, and QAnon Facebook group. And so this is a hat tip to Incarnated Forever, and he pointed this out on Twitter. Because Dan Crenshaw is familiar with the whole Q movement, will he ask Mr. Watkins the Q? Will he ask him to explain who QAnon is? And here is a Newsweek headline. This was from a year ago, and I can't even use all of these words because I'm afraid I will get called out for speech that is not allowed by YouTube. But it reads, 5 Republican candidates linked to RACIST, far-right conspiracy Facebook group, later removed themselves from the page, and they were referring to Representative Dan Crenshaw. So that will be something to watch tomorrow. And let's finish up with this. This was James Cinco writes, unfortunately, we at the Weather Channel confirm the death toll from Hurricane Dorian continues to climb. A total of 11 people have died, 8 in the Bahamas, 7 on Abaco Island, 1 in Grand Bahama, 2 deaths in Florida, and 1 in Puerto Rico. And then we had this. Sergeant First Class Dustin Ard, a Green Beret from 1st Special Forces Group, died from wounds sustained during combat operations in Zabul Province, Afghanistan on Thursday. He left behind a young daughter and a pregnant wife, according to a local newspaper. So let's pray, guys. Father, thank you for the service of Sergeant First Class Dustin Ard. We remember his family, his parents, his brothers and sisters, his wife and his child, and the baby that's in the oven. Father, we know that those who give up their lives to preserve our nation's freedom have not died in vain. Help his family to remember this. Comfort them in their grief, Father. And take care of his kids like only you can, because you are a father too. And we also ask for comfort for those who've lost family members and friends in this hurricane. We ask you, Father, keep it away from the mainland, push it out to sea, and minimize, Father, we ask for you to minimize the damage. Father, we also remember our president, who sounded very weary when he talked the other day about this hurricane, and we know that there's so much pressure on him, Father, but he need only turn to you. And like David needed the help of 4 warriors when he faced giants, and they took over for him. Father, provide people to take over for Donald Trump when he is tired. Give him counselors of wisdom and discernment and righteousness. I lift up this audience to you, Father, as we work very hard at not becoming weary in well-doing. And we keep the faith and we keep pushing forward, and we do not allow these people that are just puppets of the enemy, because our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against the powers and the authorities and the spiritual forces in high places that are controlled by Satan. But keep us strong, Father. Keep us good-natured and laughing. Help us to find good every day and to remember to thank you and to rejoice always. Okay, guys, and let's end with this. We know what the left is trying to do. We know they're trying to wear us out. But if God is for us, who shall be against us? Psalm 94, verses 21 through 23. They gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood. But the Lord is my defense, and my God is the rock of my refuge. And he shall bring upon them their own iniquity, and shall cut them off in their own wickedness. Yea, the Lord our God shall cut them off. Let's rejoice and give thanks, guys. Have a great day, have a great night, and I will see you next time.